Good. All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Blackwell with the Better Business Bureau, and welcome to our webinar and workshop today on virtual currencies, better known as cryptocurrencies, right? We're so thankful that you're here with us today. We have people from all over the country joining us. So again, welcome. What is virtual currency? There's so much confusion about it. I mean, is it the same as cryptocurrency? Is it legal? How do you spend it? How do you buy it? There are so many questions that we have, and that's why we have invited a specialist. Our panelist today is Stuart Von Cannon. Stuart is the, gosh, you're everything, really, FBI. He's the FBI Richmond Cyber Task Force. He's on that, as well as a detective with the Henrico County Police. Stuart has put together a terrific PowerPoint for us to help us understand what virtual currencies are. So what I want to let you know is that we're ready to start. If you have any questions, be sure to put them in the chat box, okay? And we're going to get to those in just a moment. All right, Stuart, I'm going to let you go over and begin with our PowerPoint. But first, just a couple housekeeping little notes, folks. Please be sure to mute your audio, okay? Because it sends reverb. So if you've got your audio on, please be sure to mute that. This is being recorded, so we'll have a link to share with you later. And also, again, we're here to answer your questions. So please be sure to put them in the chat box and we'll be monitoring that, okay? So with that being said, let's begin our webinar on virtual currencies, all right?
All right, thank you, Leslie. Yeah. So I'm just assuming everybody out there can hear me okay. I suppose if they can't, they will find some way to let us know.
Okay. So just to help us out, you know, it's like a Wild West fight. So many people are interested in this, but they don't even know where to begin. So I know you're going to get that.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Stuart Von Cannon. I wear several different hats. I'm first and foremost a detective with the Henrico County Police Division. I've worked with them for over 11 years. For the past 7 years or so, I've been assigned as a detective to our cybercrime, which is a unit of one.
They can't hear.
In that capacity, I'm assigned to the FBI Cyber Task Force, where I work out of the Richmond FBI office, embedded with their agents.
Saying they can't hear you. Hold on one sec.
Let's make sure.
1 second.
Okay.
And I think I got it.
How about that?
There we go. There we go. All right. Sorry, folks. You want to start back over there, Stuart?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a brief introduction on myself. My name is Stuart Von Cannon. I am a detective with the Henrico County Police Division, where I've worked for over 11 years. For the past 7 years or so, I've been assigned as a detective, our one and only cyber detective, where I am embedded within the FBI's Cyber Task Force out of the FBI Richmond Field Office. So in that role, I investigate all kinds of computer-enabled or cyber crimes such as internet fraud, computer intrusions, which we call hacking, money laundering, online extortion, things like that. So pretty much all crime these days really touches a computer, so we get pulled in lots of different directions, but these are kind of the main things that we're responsible for. So many people never have heard of a task force or the FBI Cyber Task Force, so I like to touch on this very quickly before we begin, just so people kind of know what I'm talking about when I reference that. The task force is made up of investigators from local agencies who are embedded within the FBI Cyber Squad. We help them by giving them more manpower and more resources from the state and local level, and they help us obviously by giving us a much larger jurisdiction and more capabilities and resources that I would not normally have over at Henrico. I'm deputized as a task force officer, which means I have full federal law enforcement authorities to go along with my normal Henrico state authorities. So I can investigate stuff on a local level that somebody brings to me from the county. And if it's something that meets the threshold or becomes large enough, I can just very easily turn it into a federal investigation, really just by doing nothing different. So it's very easy, gives us lots of flexibility, and it's a win-win for all the partners involved. So I just like to explain what that means before I get started, because again, it's not always obvious to a lot of people. So I know we have lots of people out there virtually. Sorry, I was trying to get it. I'm starting with the pop quiz though, especially for you lucky people here in the room. I want to get an idea of whether or not we think is virtual currency legal to own. Does anybody have a strong opinion one way or another on that?
The folks that are participating can put their answer in the chat box for the pop quiz. Is it legal to own virtual currency? Yes or no? What do you think? All right, we've got somebody here in person.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say it is.
Yeah, we've got a lot of folks saying yes.
Okay. So I'm seeing yeses in the chat. I'm seeing I don't knows. The answer is yes, it is legal. So there is or can be some common misconceptions surrounding virtual currency. A lot of times, more historically in the past, but even still, it is associated with bad activity, right?
Right.
Buying drugs off the dark web and buying rocket launchers on the internet, and can be used for that. We will get into that. But just pure ownership of the various types of currency we're going to talk about today is totally legal. So the next question, can it be tracked?
Go ahead
No.
and answer in the chat box if you'd like. Can virtual currency be tracked? What do you think? Anybody? You're in
I
person.
see I don't know, I see depends, I say yes.
What do you think? We have a banker in
Not
the crowd.
easily.
Can it be?
Yeah, true.
What do you think? Can it be tracked?
All right, so the answer is yes. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
I'll give it to Tammy in the chat who said it depends. It does depend. Again, we will get more into the details of it all. There are many different types of virtual currencies out there. They all operate differently. Some are more similar than others. The most common virtual currency out there is Bitcoin, right? We've all heard of Bitcoin. Some of the other more common ones are Litecoin and Ethereum and Monero. And again, they all operate differently. I'm going to kind of default to Bitcoin a lot of times when I'm talking about this, just because it's the most prevalent. It's like, when you talk about a Xerox machine, is it really a Xerox machine or is it a copier? I know, I got copier, but all over myself there. But anyways, hey, I love copy. Absolutely, yeah. We probably, yeah. I'm very I work with Cobb a lot.
And we digress. Okay, back to cryptocurrency. All right.
So anyways, it kind of can be tracked. We have various tools that can allow it. Oh, I did not realize I'm covering up the screen. All right. So a little bit of like a housekeeping, verbiage type thing. Virtual currency is, it is what it says it is. It is a currency that is virtual. There is nothing physical about it. If I have a Bitcoin, I don't have a physical coin of any significant value, right? Now, sometimes you will see people will make coins that have the information that is needed digitally, right, for some of these currency on it. And in a sense, it becomes like a physical thing. But to keep it simple, the virtual currency is nothing physical about it. So cryptocurrency is always something that is just virtual. It lives in the digital world. Not all virtual currency is technically cryptocurrency. You know, there are some virtual currencies that are just like basically just tokens that you can buy and just move around like you would normal money. And again, I'm not trying to get crazy into the weeds on this. It's a little bit of a, does it really matter? But just to throw it out there, you know, cryptocurrency, always a digital thing, but all of that digital currency is not necessarily cryptocurrency. So just, again, that honestly doesn't really matter that much, but it's just something that I kind of like to note.
Yeah, you like to differentiate.
I do.
I wanted to call this webinar Understanding Cryptocurrency. And you said, nope.
Yeah, it's just, it's
Virtual
like, you know,
currency.
I probably overthink it a little bit, but so what is cryptocurrency? You know, it is, like I've mentioned, it is totally digital. There's nothing physical or tangible about it. It is decentralized, meaning generally, like when we talk about Bitcoin and Litecoin and stuff like that, there is no centralized entity that is in control of it. Bitcoin is controlled by all of the users, and all of that data and information is spread amongst the internet and the world and the users. There's no one person who, or one conglomerate or one entity that can go and say, I am the key holder of Bitcoin, I control Bitcoin. Some of these, you know, more virtual type currencies, these tokens are something that is run, you know, by a company. You know, you'll hear about XRP, which is, you know, something that's controlled by the Ripple company. Microsoft has their own types of tokens. So things like that are more centralized in the sense, but generally this cryptocurrency is decentralized. It's based off cryptography. These tokens and coins are formed and authenticated and transferred through very complex math algorithms that we're not even going to pretend to get into today. It's new. It's been, Bitcoin was, you know, first came around in 2009. It was invented by a unknown person called Satoshi Nakamoto, who nobody knows who he is. He's never come forward. May have been a person using that identity, or may have been a group of people that went by that name. It's borderless. Again, kind of goes with the decentralized nature of it all, where it is, you know, if I'm here in the US and I need to send, you know, a Bitcoin to somebody in China or Iran or California, it doesn't matter. I can, you know, this stuff knows no borders as long as you have an internet connection. It's typically very fast to transfer amongst people. And then it is pseudonymous. It is not totally anonymous because, as I mentioned before, sometimes it can be tracked. But even though some of these currencies can be tracked, and typically every transaction is public, it's on the public blockchain, which is a public ledger of all of the transactions that have ever taken place. Well, I can go back and see all of those specific transactions. That doesn't necessarily tell me who was the person that was making those transactions. Now, we in the law enforcement world have some ways that we can kind of peel back another layer and try to rip away some of that anonymity. But generally, as it's being used, you know, you might always be able to see the money that I am sending from my wallets or my addresses, although you just won't know that it's actually me that's doing it.
Stuart, I know you're going to walk us through a typical transaction here shortly to help us understand how the wallets work and how you can purchase items through your Bitcoin or your different virtual currencies. So
Yep,
again,
absolutely.
I'd like to remind all of our participants, this is your opportunity to answer any questions or to ask any questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll be taking those up throughout the next 45 minutes.
So we'll hear some common terms today. I'm not typically one for just reading off the slides, but I've got 3 slides where I'm going to hit 6 important terms. Because one thing you're going to hear talked about all the time is a wallet, right? What is my Bitcoin wallet? What is my virtual currency wallet? The wallet is a software program where that currency is quote unquote stored, right? They facilitate the sending and the receiving of this currency, gives that ownership of that balance to the user. So when I have, my, 5 Bitcoin, I house that, in my Bitcoin wallet. So the way that I kind of equate that to real world, because it's always easier to compare this stuff to real money that we're all used to using all the time. If I go to a bank and I walk in and say, I need a bank account and I need to log into that bank account online, they can open as many bank accounts as I want, and I'm going to have kind of one online login portal for that. I kind of equate the wallet to that login portal where I can log into my bank and then see everything that I have under there. When we get to the Bitcoin address, I equate that more to the actual bank account itself. So I can log in to Bank of America and see, which would be, my wallet. And then I can see under that wallet any number of addresses that I have within there. And I can move money to and from those different wallets. I can move money from my wallet to your wallet, or my address to your address. The address is basically just like a bank account for that virtual currency. And I've got 2 examples here on the screen, which you may or may not have seen something like that before, but these addresses are just long hash values that look like a bunch of garbage, but that is the value that is necessary for. So if I'm going to send somebody a Bitcoin, I just need to know their address so I can designate that to send it.
It's almost like Zelle.
Yeah.
Like a Zelle, you can send money to. So, but you've got to have that wallet, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail. I was curious. One of the do's and don'ts is that they always say use a hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can get into that first in a little bit, okay?
Yeah. I'll touch on that when I get to talking about kind of where a lot of this stuff is stored.
Okay.
So I've already mentioned the blockchain once. You're gonna hear that over and over, but the blockchain is just a digital ledger, a running history of the transactions that are made in the Bitcoin or whatever virtual currency ledger, and it goes back to the beginning of time for whatever blockchain you're looking at. So for Bitcoin, we can go back and we can see, the very first Bitcoin transaction that ever took place and every single one ever since then. If you know the information you're looking for, like the address or the transaction ID, you can go back and see all of that stuff historically.
Would you agree that blockchain, I have a definition here, it's basically like record keeping technology?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yep, and there's all kinds of research being done now to see, what other areas of our world can blockchain technology be implemented. It's quite the buzzword right now.
Exactly.
Mining is the process by which these cryptographic transactions are verified and then added to the blockchain. So again, not to get into crazy detail on it, but when I facilitate a Bitcoin transaction, that process has to be verified by these algorithms, and the nodes, the users out there that dedicate hardware to solving these complex math problems are rewarded with a small kickback, and that's the mining process. That's how new Bitcoin is generated, so to speak. And I'm going to touch more on that later as well. I'll show you some examples of a couple different mining operations.
Good. Just a reminder, once again, if you have any questions, feel free to put your question in the chat box, and we will make sure that Stuart Von Cannon answers those for you today. We have a question here in our audience.
Talk a little loud, I'm having trouble.
Yes,
Sure.
I will talk as loud as is this a little bit better? Okay.
There you go. All right, blockchain and mining.
Okay, so an exchange, a Bitcoin exchange, that I've equated this to a bank a couple times, the bank account or your online login, like the wallet is. The exchange is the bank, so to speak, right? If I want to obtain virtual currency, where do I go to do that? One of the options I have is going to a virtual currency exchange, like Coinbase is a very popular one. Bitstamp, Binance, there's all kinds of these different exchanges out there that are similar to Village Bank or Atlantic Union Bank or Wells Fargo. And I can go to any of these places, I can open up an account at the exchange and then buy whatever kind of virtual currency they will allow me to buy. And the last definition I'm going to touch on is a tumbling service. This is a little bit of what gets into the more nefarious use of various virtual currency. These tumbling services are online platforms that will allow a user to sometimes launder or just move the funds through hundreds of different little hops. So when law enforcement is trying to track it, eventually, we'll run into a dead end. Or some of the tumbling services now are taking, Bitcoin and moving it into a different type of virtual currency, and then a different type, and a different type, and a different type, until it finally makes its way out on the other side, either back to Bitcoin or to whatever currency the user ultimately wants. And it just, it makes hiding it, it makes that pseudonymous nature of this stuff much more anonymous and much more difficult to track.
Okay. Moving along here.
So there's all kinds of different types of this stuff, right? And I mentioned this before. Bitcoin is, it's the top dog. It's kind of the standard. It's what everybody knows. It's what's the most popular. It's been around since 2009. There's also Ethereum. There's Litecoin, Ripple. You'll hear all kinds of different types of these currencies. They're all a little bit different, but they're all same in the sense that they are completely digital, virtual. They work different ways. They can be used for different things. Some are accepted more widely than others. Some have a very specific, only one type of use, depending on what type that token is. But we're not just talking about Bitcoin here. We're talking about hundreds or thousands of different types of virtual currencies that are out there.
Stuart, is there one currency that's better than others? How do you know?
Yeah, I would say not necessarily better. There are some that are more stable than others. There are some, obviously there are some that are much more affordable than others if you want to have, a whole token, so to speak. Bitcoin, I think, is around $30,000 right now for one Bitcoin. There are some that are fractions of pennies. So, people with the get rich quick schemes are trying to buy billions of tokens worth tens of thousands of a fraction of a penny and hope, well, if this just gets up to 1 penny, I'll be a billionaire. But then that specific token would be worth more than the GDP of the entire world. Yes, sir.
There is.
So he asked which federal agency regulates this type of currency. I'm not going to totally call it the wild, wild west, but it is still very new, right? There are measures in place, with the IRS, where if you're investing in this stuff and you're making money off of it, you have to pay taxes on those gains, right? And the exchanges that I've talked about, at least the US-based ones, they do not want to be regulated into oblivion. So they are very much requiring all kinds of know your customer requirements, right? When I open an account at one of these exchanges, I'm going to have to submit a copy of my driver's license and a picture of myself and proof of my residency. So I don't really totally know the answer to that question. There is some regulation going on. At the same time, it's still very new and lots of questions surrounding all
that. That's a little frightening.
Can be.
Yeah. All righty. Especially when you hear, I told you earlier, I was thinking about all the headlines in the last couple of weeks with the market being so erratic. And I have one here. This was from May 9th. The cryptocurrency markets wiped out 200 billion in 24 hours on stablecoin crash. That's one. And another one was the price of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, plunged, shedding billions in value, while Coinbase, the largest crypto trading platform in the US, has lost half its value over the past week.
Good
Ouch.
timing.
That's, you know, so
Yeah.
you're wiped out, but there's no regulation. You take it as a loss.
Yeah, so I pulled the market values for, the top 10 virtual currencies. I think this is accurate as of yesterday morning, where yesterday morning Bitcoin was at about $29,000 per Bitcoin, whereas a week or two before it was closer to 40 or 45, and within the last year it was up around $65,000 per Bitcoin. Ethereum's at 2,000. If you look down at the bottom and you see that Dogecoin, at 8 cents per token, well, that used to be, 0.00008 cents, right? So, there's people that have made some money off of that, and Dogecoin went to, it was at least 30 cents. I think it's been, maybe around 50 or 60 cents, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. People buy tens of thousands of those things and then just hope for the best. But yeah, the crypto market's been wiped out. So is the regular stock market.
Correct.
So sometimes they correlate to one another, right? Other times it's inverse because people are panicking in the stock market. They might, take money and move it into Bitcoin or some other virtual currency that they see as being a possible alternative to the stock market, which I will also kind of touch on that later on.
Can I ask you a question, Stuart? How long, like from an investor standpoint, if you purchase some virtual currencies, how long do you hold them? We're told when we buy stocks, hold them, for long term, that kind of thing. What about this market?
I think it depends on the market. You're not going to be making back dividends with this stuff, right? So, you're totally incumbent upon the value in whatever currency you invest in and rising over time. Now, when we look at Bitcoin right now at $30,000, that looks awful compared to where it was last week or the week before or a year ago. However, if you had told me back in 2011, when Bitcoin was $0.0001, that it would be worth $30,000 one day, I would have dumped every single penny I could find into it, right? So it depends. And, this stuff is used very commonly for investment purposes. If you're going to do that, it is somewhat risky. And so you have to be prepared for that. But I mean, look, there is the chance to make significant money off of it.
That's what it says. Investing in crypto assets is risky, but also potentially extremely profitable.
It is. A lot of people may have heard this story of I think one of the first things ever actually purchased with Bitcoin was a pizza. And somebody, back in 2010 or whenever it was, paid 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza, right? Which back then they thought was the greatest thing ever. It's like, I just got this pizza and all I had to do was pay 10,000 Bitcoin for it. But now, someone take 10,000 times 29,000, and that's quite an expensive pizza that they paid for. So, hindsight's 20/20 there. If I could have invested in this, before anybody had ever heard of it, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on an island somewhere.
So again, just as an investor, you would look at these markets, whatever you've invested in, whatever virtual currencies, you'd be kind of like you look at your stock market or your bank portfolio, right?
And just like anything can affect the stock, Elon Musk can tweet something and either totally tank the market or totally drive it up. Same thing goes with a virtual currency. World events affect the values of these things. So it's, in this sense, it is very equatable to real money, normal investments.
Don't forget to ask your questions. We're here to answer them until 10 o'clock.
So I'm going to walk you through how to get this stuff. Okay. So I've mentioned the online exchanges. That's pretty clear cut. Okay. If I want to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever through one of these exchanges, I go to their website, I open an account, I submit whatever records they want to see. Eventually they'll approve it. And then I can link my bank account. I can put US currency into these exchanges, click a button and convert it to whatever type of virtual currency I want. I'm going to have to pay a little bit of a fee for it, but that's the cost of doing business. And then I can move that money outside of that exchange. I can move that into cold storage, like you mentioned, or I can just leave it right there.
Everything is online. My big concern, I think you hear it a lot, is what happens if the grid goes down?
Yeah,
That's the biggest fear. What happens if our internet goes out, the grids are out, we can't access our money? What happens in that case?
yeah, it's gonna be tough to move that stuff if you can't access it.
Correct.
So I hope that doesn't happen.
Wing and a prayer.
Yeah. So when we talk about peer-to-peer transactions, if I want to move some of this currency outside of these exchanges, I can meet somebody, I can meet a friend in a parking lot, and we can both have, if we have the apps that we need on our phone, we can exchange this currency peer-to-peer with one another. It's still, it's going through the internet, so the grid's down, doesn't really help. But we can do these peer-to-peer transactions, and here's another example. You see that hash value down there, that address. This is for a Litecoin example. But if I want somebody to send Litecoin to my address, I can just hold this up to their phone. They can scan that with their app, and then we can facilitate transactions that way, just amongst two people. Or let's say I want to have a fundraiser for some reason, right? And I would like people to donate to me through Litecoin. I can just put this on a website, and now everybody knows my address that they want to pay to. They can scan that and just send money straight to this Litecoin address. So that's one way to facilitate these payments, outside of those exchanges, just on a peer-to-peer level.
I've actually got a question in chat. Can cryptocurrency be exchanged back into US dollars?
Yes. Yep.
Good question.
That can either be done through the exchanges. I can just, go back and basically just reconvert whatever virtual currency I have back to US dollars and then pipe it back into my bank account. Or that can also be done peer-to-peer, right? If I meet with a buddy and, for whatever reason, they're willing to give me X amount of US dollars for whatever virtual currency, that can also be facilitated through those apps. Good question. I've touched on the mining. I'll get into that a little bit more, but just as a reminder, that's the process by which new Bitcoin are brought into the world through the confirmation process of these transactions. But a kind of bit of a new phenomenon is these crypto ATMs that are popping up all over the place. Have you guys heard of these? So I actually took this picture. This is one of our Bitcoin ATMs in Henrico County. I went to it and I messed around with it for a little bit. In order to use it, you have to put your phone number in, you have to scan your ID, but then I can take cash, I can take $100 bill, put it into the ATM and click on whatever virtual currency it'll offer, and then it'll send it right to the app on my phone. So just like that, you can go to these ATMs, and they're popping up everywhere.
Nowadays, fraud and scams, people watching the machine and gathering data from them, we were told. Have you heard that yet or not yet?
I haven't, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, it's fraud everywhere, right? If there's money's involved, there's fraud involved. So this is a map of our general area here. For those of you not here in Henrico County with us, you may not recognize the area too much, but we are here. We are right here by this red dot, and that's somewhere one of these gas stations right by us. There's one of these ATMs, along with all throughout the Richmond area.
So are you finding most of these ATM machines within like other businesses? They're not freestanding?
No, they're typically within gas stations a lot of times, but they're all over the place. They're easy to access, they're easy to use, and convenience is a thing. We are seeing with with some of the fraud that we're investigating, a lot of the scammers online, are requiring various types of ransom payments for whatever reason through virtual currency. And this is one of the quickest and easiest ways for people to obtain virtual currency, as opposed to having to go to one of these exchanges and open up an account and go through what can be sometimes a several day long approval process. These virtual currency ATMs are pretty instant.
I've got two questions for you in chat. The first one is going back to the converting to the US dollar, converting back to the US dollar may lose value of the US dollar prior to the first conversion?
Can you read that again?
Yeah, so if converting back to the US dollar may lose value of the US dollar prior to the first conversion. So I think they were saying is like if you were to take it out, but since Bitcoin is so, or just any cryptocurrency is still fluctuating, if you were to
Yeah,
put it
you
back,
very-
it would lose value.
You very much, yeah, you very well might lose money, especially when you account for fees involved as well. Yeah.
Another
And
question too. Yeah, this is a good one.
is there anyone who monitors the ATM machines?
Nope.
Nobody monitors.
Nope.
Oh, boy, do I feel comfortable.
They are run by companies, right? So, it's not just like one random guy has an ATM, right? It is more along the lines of, whatever gas station owner wants to have one of these ATMs. And so they contact the company that then, has the machine at the property. So, there is a backbone infrastructure to these machines out there. It's not just a one-off type thing run by a random person. So maybe I should have been more clear about that, but yeah. Hey, you could get into something new.
Little sidebar comments over here from the crowd.
Yeah.
Copy machines are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You see the big-
All right, it says Todd Mitchell. Hi, Todd. He says, remember, it is not real money that is backed by any government.
Yep.
Good point. Todd is our cybersecurity guy too. It's not real money that's backed by any government. So it is a
Correct.
little bit like the Wild West, the big risk.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
think, is it here to stay?
I don't think it's going anywhere.
You don't, okay. All right. Continue on with your PowerPoints about the mining now.
All right, so when I talk about mining, like I've said, that's the process by which these math formulas, these equations, these algorithms are all processed, right? Well, that takes computing power. So this is kind of a little bit of a bootleg version of a mining operation where somebody had all these dozens of little processors set up in a way that they were being fully dedicated to solve these math problems. And when they were solved and verified, this person would get a kickback on that Bitcoin, right? So you can see at the top, they all have fans on top of them because this actually takes quite a lot of power. And it has become, generally, it's become more expensive to mine this stuff than money you actually get out of it because of the power consumption involved. I met a guy one time who lives out in Colorado who actually had a whole outdoor shed dedicated to an operation like this. He had all these different processes set up in there, but he was able to run the power for them and the AC off of solar power that he had set up. So that's kind of a good way of going about it. But yeah, but if you're having to pay a power bill for this, it's gonna run up quite high because of the processing power, and then the heat that's generated, you got to keep this stuff cool. So, but this is like a rookie version. And then this is like a kind of all-in-one little mining rig where it's got the built-in fan, it's got the built-in processor, and you can connect it to your computer and you can control it all, and it's going to sit there and crunch. And to be honest with you, I used to know kind of the output on how much you would make off of these things, but so much has changed recently with the values. I don't remember how much you're going to pop out, but you're not going to make a ton of money off this, maybe a couple $1,000s a year. But if you get a bunch of them in a warehouse in China, you can you can make some money off of it. So this is a professional operation in China where they got thousands and thousands of these processors all in a warehouse. And I mean, they're probably pumping out millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin a year.
And they just take a percentage as kind of, that's how they make their.
Oh, I mean, they're just keeping whatever they make on this because it's, they put the money in and then whatever they get back from it now is it's theirs to keep and then sell down the road.
Yeah, we're going to want to talk about taxable, the tax implications, how the IRS looks at cryptocurrency, virtual currencies. We'll get into that in just a moment, Carmen. I see you've asked a question, but let's continue on here with virtual currency mining, okay?
I think that might be it for the mining.
Is that it? There we go.
I'm just, to talk on the taxing. Look, I don't know everything. I don't work for the IRS. I don't really deal with taxes that much. I investigate this stuff. Bottom line is, if you make money off of it as an investment through any of these exchanges, yes, you have to pay taxes on it. Other than that, unfortunately, I'm really not an expert on that. But yes, there are tax implications. And these exchanges, whether you buy it on Robinhood or Coinbase or whatever, they will send you the necessary tax information that you need to file it as gains when you file your taxes.
So they'll show you a profit loss kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. If you're lucky enough to make money on it, then you're lucky enough to pay taxes
If
on
you're lucky enough, that really sounds
Mhm.
encouraging.
it. Yeah. So, all right. So we've kind of talked about what it is, right? We've got hopefully a general understanding now of, okay, it's not an actual thing I can keep in my pocket. All right, nobody's in control of it. All right, I kind of know how to get it now. So now what are we going to do with it, right? So we've talked a lot about the investment bullet point here already, so I won't dive into that a whole bunch. But there are legal, legitimate uses for this stuff, just like there is with cash, and there are illegal, illicit things that you can purchase with this stuff, just like with cash, right? So virtual currency is not bad, just like a $100 bill is not bad, but it can certainly be used for bad things, just like cash can be used for bad things. So we're going to talk about, legal, legitimate stuff. It is becoming more and more and more mainstream to be able to use virtual currency, in the real world, at Starbucks, at Panera, at Office Max. Here's just a list of places that in some form or fashion accept Bitcoin, right? So now I can't sit here and tell you that you can go into the subway across the street and buy a sandwich with Bitcoin, but there are ways that companies are accepting this more and more now. If I want to buy a website, and this is something that we run into, from the investigation side a lot, scammers will make fake websites, to look like the Better Business Bureau. Well, they can go to some of these domain registration sites and pay with Bitcoin, and it adds a little extra hiccup for investigators trying to track that down. So even though that's a totally legal use, is buying these domains with that stuff, kind of makes things a little bit more difficult.
Well,
But
we know that scammers like to duplicate and
Mhm.
replicate, websites.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was going to ask you, needless to say, you go to the BBB and check out to see if they're a legitimate business. But I'm hoping that you're going to shed some light on what we should look into in terms of their legality and if they're a legitimate company
Yeah.
before you start plunking down your hard-earned cash.
Yeah, right, exactly. You can go buy a Tesla with Bitcoin. It's becoming more and more mainstream. So if you got it, you can spend it, or you can hold on to it. If we want to talk about the illicit use of Bitcoin, which is, again, maybe more of a popular mindset surrounding this stuff than buying a Subway sandwich. But this is a screenshot I took of a dark web marketplace. So if you know how to access the dark web, you can get on there and you can access these 1990s looking versions of Amazon, and you can buy all kinds of cool stuff. So this particular site, you've got drugs, counterfeit goods, software, malware, digital goods, all kinds of awful things you can buy. This particular screenshot shows, Caribbean import cocaine and platinum kush, and you can see that forms of currency here. Bitcoin is accepted for this one, as well as Monero. This one they only accept Bitcoin. This one they only accept Bitcoin. But when you go to buy something like this, you can click on go to the offer. You put in your information or whatever information you want on where you want to get the stuff shipped. You pay them with Bitcoin or Monero, and it's literally like buying something off of Amazon. It's just this is the darker side of that world.
I was going to say, tell us about the dark web. Just can you give us, it exists, obviously.
Yeah, it exists. So there's several different ways that you can access it. The most popular way is through what's called the Onion router, Tor, which is a web browser based off of Mozilla Firefox. So if you know how to install Firefox and double click and open it up to get to the internet, you can install Tor and double click on it and get to the dark web.
Why would one want to go onto the dark web?
So Tor is not necessarily the dark web. So let me start by saying there's really no value or legitimate reason in getting on the dark web unless you're like an investigator or researcher or something. But Tor itself has all kinds of legitimate uses. Journalists around the world use it because the way that Tor works is it opens up an encrypted connection from wherever you are, and it bounces your network traffic through several different hops throughout the world. So we can be here in Henrico, and it can bump us through Scotland, and then China, and then Denmark, right? And then we pop out to the internet. So the end site or service that we're accessing doesn't actually know we're here in Virginia. They just see our traffic coming out of that last hop. So that is valuable for journalists overseas that maybe in countries or locations that are not super friendly to journalists or don't have access to the internet as a whole because certain things are blocked. So to answer your question, that's a quick general reason for using Tor. But as far as the dark web itself goes, that is kind of a shady place.
Stay away.
Yeah, stay away.
Good.
Unless you want some Caribbean import cocaine.
No, so
Hey, you're retired. You do what you want.
it's interesting. One of the top scams we see a lot of the romance scams, the older folks, actually more and more young ones are falling prey to it as well. And what we understand is that a lot of that is being paid for through virtual currencies. A lot of romance scams are asking for money, through Bitcoin and through different cryptos.
They are.
You see the romance scams a lot?
It's probably one of the things I deal with the most.
Oh.
It's a little bit of a tangent from this, but I think it's worth touching on where we're seeing vulnerable people being targeted by overseas scammers, and these targeting operations go on for months and months and years, where I've run investigations and talked to victims and gotten the information off their phones, and I can see they've been talking to the scammer for the past 11 months, and they sent 20,000 text messages back and forth, and 99.8% of those text messages are the scammer either telling the victim how much they love them and how much they change the world and just totally grooming them, and then saying, hey, I need you to send this money for me. It's for my business. I'm coming back to the United States next month. And then, they obviously never show up. I could talk for 3 hours on the romance scam thing.
We'll do another webinar.
I think we probably should do that. Yeah.
Because it is. It's a real thing.
Yeah, I think that's worthwhile. So I won't get too into that now, but yeah, virtual currency is used because, like I said at the beginning, it knows no borders, right? So for some poor victim in Florida, it's nothing for them to get $5,000 or $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, send it to some bozo over in Africa, and then it's instant like that. Now the person in Africa, the scammer's got all the money, and this person here is just waiting for the boyfriend to come home. Meanwhile, they're out 10 grand. So to quickly touch on the investment, so I pulled the top two here are for the lifetime of Bitcoin on the left and XRP, which is also called Ripple, on the right. So you can see that, in 2014, 2015, 2016 for Bitcoin, it was worth nothing, right? In 2017, it popped up like crazy to $20,000. And we were like, oh my God, if only I had known, I would have bought it back then. And then it quickly came crashing back down to 10,000 to 5,000. And we were like, yeah, I knew that was a fluke. Well, if I had only known that 5,000 was a good deal, right? So that's kind of what goes back to talking about the investment process. Because then you can see in 2020, it shot up to $65,000 and then quickly came crashing back down to 30. Well, 2021, it goes up to almost 70,000. So that's just for one Bitcoin, right? Which one Bitcoin used to be fractions of a dollar. So we are obviously in the times now where we're coming back to this valley again, where Bitcoin is under $30,000, and people are panicking. People have millions and billions of dollars tied up in this stuff. So they're taking a hurting now. Who's to say it's not going to go up to 80 next year? Who's to say it's not going to go to 8,000, right? Same with XRP on the right. That is one of the ones I pulled this because I like to talk about these tokens that are just worth fractions and fractions and fractions of a penny. Because again, people buy tens of thousands or millions, or depending on how cheap they are, billions of these tokens with just the hope that if it just reaches a penny or if it just reaches a dollar. Well, you can see XRP did this. It was worth pennies, 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 pennies. And then back in middle of 2016, it approached 30 and 40 cents. And we're like, hey, we're making some money off of this stuff now. And then it skyrocketed very quickly to $3.50 almost. And I personally know people that had a lot of this stuff and we're doing very well for a minute and decided to hold on to it. And then it came right back down to where it started, right? So over the last year or so, it's gone up again to $1.50, almost $2, and it comes back down. But I think this shows the incredible amount of gains that you can make off of this stuff. But it's gambling, right? It's more gambling than investment because there's no strategy behind it, like a business has that's going to profit over time and make money. It is a gamble. For those of us who like to gamble, it can be a little bit of fun. And then the bottom's the same thing. It's just I think I just pulled it for the last year for Shiba Inu, which is another one of these fractions of a fraction coin, where it's gone. You can see it's 0.000010 cents. Well, it went up to 0.0008, right? So while it's still extremely cheap, that's a significant amount of percentage, and then it all comes crashing back down.
You really have to have nerves of steel.
If you're going to put a lot of money into it.
Yeah. What would you advise if somebody just wanted to start small? I just want to dabble, put $500 to $1,000. Well, how do you invest in that? What would you suggest?
I can't suggest anything because that's not my role. But I mean, I personally don't think there's any harm in throwing a little bit of money. If it's money you can stand to lose, throw it into something. If nothing else, it's a learning experience, right? You can learn about these different types of coins and tokens. You can learn about how the whole process works. It's very interesting. It's very, very new still. So again, I'm not going to tell somebody to go, cash out their 401k and put it into this stuff. But I personally don't see any reason against dabbling in it if it's something that interests you.
One other question too. You see a lot of ads today, Stuart, for someone for a bank the other day. Hey, purchase this, and it can go into your, your investment portfolio, purchasing virtual currency. So it's being touted now as an investment tool in like in your retirement.
Yep, it is. Yep, it's being built into a lot of retirement packages. I mean, there's a lot of the tech companies that are new and startup are paying employees in this stuff. Some people elect to get paid in Bitcoin. So that's kind of a new thing that we're seeing. But again, it has no intrinsic value until you cash it out and turn it into US currency for the most part. So
oh, that's been a lot to absorb. Let's discuss. We've got a couple questions here. We've got, let's see, about 5 minutes until we have to say goodbye to Stuart. So any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Josh, you want to go ahead and ask the questions?
Yeah, let's see. I got one. Mr. Mitchell, in the mining process, do you have to have anything of value to back the initial making of a crypto coin? Is that backing held somewhere as security?
no, nope. The mining process is you dedicating your computing power to solve those transaction hashes. And as a reward for that, you know, you kind of get a little bit kicked back to you. It's not a lot. It used to be much more profitable. There is a limited number of Bitcoin that will ever enter circulation. I think it's 21 million. And so the mining process, again, it's very complicated, but over time, the amount of kickback that you get from mining, the amount of Bitcoin that are mined in the transaction process, it dwindles down. So if you were mining stuff back in 2012, you were getting popped back a much larger kickback because the amount of Bitcoin still left to enter circulation was much higher, and therefore that that mining bonus, so to speak, was higher. Now there's over 19 million Bitcoin of the 21 million have already entered service. And so you're, you know, for that reason, you're just not getting that much of a kickback. And if you're just trying to do this off like, you know, a laptop or a couple laptops, it's, you know, it's not fruitful. That's why they've got these dedicated mining rigs. But no, it's nothing back. You just set it up and then you get your reward kicked back into your wallet.
Terrific. One more question. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. Is someone able to lose their account in the crypto market? If so, would they be able to retrieve it back?
Okay, so yes. So you'll hear the phrase sometimes, not your keys, not your coins, right? And all of this stuff is, you know, again, cryptography is based off of public and private keys. If I have 10 Bitcoin and I hold that all within one of these online exchanges, then I do not personally control my keys, right? That company controls my keys because that is where my currency is being held. Several years ago, there was a compromise of one of these exchanges where it wasn't billions at the time, but billions of dollars worth was stolen. And you can look it up. Just several months ago, 2 people in New York City were arrested for that. And the FBI and the IRS recovered they seized $3.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. So yes, it can be lost. It can be recovered. If you have this set up on, if you control your own keys, you can store the stuff offline, right? So there's these physical devices that you can move this digital currency onto and then disconnect that from the internet. And then you do control the keys there. And if you were to lose that device, then in theory, your coins are gone, poof. That does, in a sense, turn them into physical coins because they're on that device. But there are measures in place. There are certain precautions you can take that will allow it to be recoverable. I'll leave it at, it's a little complicated. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Last question here.
One more question. How is the coin created? And is it backed by real money at all?
Anybody with the know-how can create a virtual currency. You'll see on one of these slides, I had Dogecoin on there, and that was just created, you know, by some guy as a total joke and as a meme. And it has since, you know, become like one of the top 10 coins because it's only worth what people are going to pay for it, right? And it started off as nothing, and now it's turned into, hey, people are willing to pay this for it. You know, a lot of it's because of the potential of, hey, if I just do a bunch of these, I'm going to see if I can make some money off of it. But it's only backed by real money in the sense that if I make my own coin, and Todd, I'm having an agreement with you, and you say you'll give me $1,000 for 1,000 coins. Well, there you go. The value of my coin is $1 a piece right now. And then as we move along, as more and more get created and people want to come into the fold, maybe somebody then is going to be willing to give $2,000 for 1,000 coins. And so there the value's gone up. So no, it's not backed by any real money. It's, you know, in a sense, just created out of thin air, and it's all just incumbent upon what people are willing to pay.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
We're at the end of our hour, Stuart. It's hard to believe you've just reviewed so many great points for us. Here's the information. If you'd like to get in touch with Stuart directly, again, he's with the Cyber the Cyber Task Force with the FBI here in Richmond, Virginia. There's his email. We've got his contact information if you'd like to get in touch. We'd like to thank you so much on behalf of the Better Business Bureau serving Central Virginia. We hope that you have learned a lot. By the way, I will have, after this, we'll have a link to the recording. We've also got an incredible BBB scam study that just came out yesterday about virtual currencies and cryptocurrencies. I will be happy to send that link as well. Just let me know if you'd like to receive that. Again, on behalf of the Better Business Bureau serving Central Virginia, thank you so much for being with us today, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.